having worked with 32 attorneys in the last few months, I know that attorneys at Habush will try to get the maximum compensation for you. They're not settlement mills. They're not trying to get the most number of cases, but they're trying to work on cases till they can get the maximum outcome. We are a law firm with nationally reputed attorneys who will fight for you, who will stand by you, and who will take your burden when you focus on healing.
Welcome to Business Ninjas, brought to you by Write For Me, where you'll hear from business leaders who are out there growing their business and slaying it every day. Learn from the masters. Let's get started.
Hi, everybody. This is John Gerard. I'm here with the Business Ninjas podcast. And I'm talking today with Anjali Tapadiya, the marketing manager for Habush Habush Rottier. They're a law firm that specializes in personal injury cases. And Anjali, I'm really glad to have you on the show. You're running marketing for the whole firm, and I'd love to hear more about your background and what it is you do for Habush.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for having me, John. I really appreciate it. I'm excited for today. I am currently the marketing manager at Habush Habush Rottier. I've been working in the marketing field for about 7 years now, although in various industries. From IT to political campaigning. At one point, I was the part of the marketing and public relations team of a chief minister in India, which is the head of the state in India. And this was during the COVID-19 pandemic, so it was intense to say the least.
Oh, my goodness. That's incredible.
Yeah, I also have a master's in marketing from Texas A&M University. I made my move last year from Texas to Madison, Wisconsin to join the Habush law firm. Habush is the oldest and one of the most reputed personal injury law firms in Wisconsin. It was founded in 1930 during the Great Depression by Jesse Habush. And right now, the firm has 13 offices in Wisconsin and a track record of over $4 billion recovered as compensation for clients.
That's incredible.
So, yeah, the story of law firm is very interesting, and that was one of the first things that drew me in. So I would definitely recommend you read it. It's on the About Us section of our website.
That's incredible. It strikes me that must be one of the older law firms of this kind in the country. I mean, that's an amazing history, almost 100 years at this point.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, it's 93 years, I think.
That's incredible. Well, I want to get into all the interesting things you're doing on the marketing side in this space and the personal injury space in particular, because it can be a divisive space, and I think you've got some really interesting ways of approaching that. And it strikes me that Habush has stood out as somebody who's doing real good in this space. Before I go there, you said something really interesting about working for a government ministry during the COVID-19 pandemic. I would love to hear something about that. What was that like, and what were you doing during that period?
So I was working in a political campaigning, a cross-party political advocacy firm in India, and we had just won elections for this chief minister who is equivalent to a governor in the United States, and he asked me if I could join his team, and I was more than happy to do that. So when he switched to the government position, I started working in his marketing and communication team. I was at some point doing stuff like managing his Twitter account, writing press releases. And unfortunately, this is in 2019, 2020. So when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, no one knew what to do. And especially everyone was looking at the government for answers.
Yes.
And I remember doing courses online to learn more about pandemics, to learn more about COVID-19, just so I can explain it to an audience of almost 40 million. Break it down and explain it.
That's incredible. Well, I know we're off script here a little bit, but as soon as I heard that, I thought that is an extraordinary experience to have been in that seat at that point in history where this unprecedented thing is happening. Like you said, everybody looking to you and the government to provide answers. What an amazing experience.
Yeah, it was really intense. I remember waking up at 2 a.m. one day when they needed a press release to go out regarding something. And I was like, okay, just give me 20 minutes. I need to wash my face. And then I'm going to start writing your press release at 2 a.m.
Isn't that amazing? Well, I suspect, and maybe this is the segue into what you're doing now, that that kind of intensity, you probably feel prepared for just about anything at this point.
That's right. Yep, I do.
Yeah, incredible. Well, let's talk a little bit about how you got involved with this firm. So you mentioned that the history, the fact that it had been around for a long time, sounds like long and storied history, was one of the things that drew you in. And as I kind of mentioned in passing here, this is a very interesting space, right? So I think that if we think about the public perception of lawyers, and then especially personal injury, it's a little mixed. And yet, I think what I heard when we were preparing for this was that there's something kind of different going on here. So maybe, putting your marketing hat on, what can you share about how to market effectively into those kinds of headwinds when you're involved in an ecosystem where a lot of people are going to show up and be a little skeptical out of the gate?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. To prepare for this podcast, I was actually looking at the history of legal advertising in the United States, and it's such an incredible history. You know that legal advertising was banned in the United States until 1970s. So it's not too long ago that advertising and marketing was illegal. It was frowned upon. And I remember reading that in 1908, the American Bar Association adopted a canons of professional ethics, which had rules against advertising because advertising in the legal space was looked at as unprofessional, which is very interesting because they believed that they were part of this noble profession, which I'm sure attorneys still do,
Yes.
but advertising would make it more like a common business.
Interesting.
So
That's
it was
very
banned.
interesting.
And this changed in 1977 because the Supreme Court, there was this case, Bates versus Arizona, where the court found that attorney advertising was a form of commercial speech, which was entitled to some sort of protection under the First Amendment.
Sure.
Yeah, thank God for that. That's why I'm here. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. But
isn't that amazing? By the way, I find it a little bit ironic that it took lawyers until 1970s to argue a case about a First Amendment right. But anyway, that's
exactly. So by this time, Jesse Habush's son, Bob Habush, who's the other Habush in Habush Habush and Rottier, had joined the firm. And every time I ask someone in Wisconsin if they've ever heard of Habush Habush and Rottier, the first thing they say is, yes, I've been seeing your commercials growing up. Mm-hmm. So Bob Habush really pioneered marketing and advertising in Wisconsin when it came to the legal industry. I remember seeing these ads that they ran in the early 80s. It was called Knowing the Law series, which was informing people of their rights in very simple language, and they became a big hit. So marketing and advertising in the legal industry still has many laws. For example, in Wisconsin, you can't really say you're the best in the industry unless you can factually substantiate it in any way. You can't really give something of value to your clients for recommending your services. So there are many things like that in the legal industry, and you have to sort of pass through these barriers and then design a campaign, which is, again, different from the ambulance chasing ads that you now see, which are associated mostly with personal injury.
Yep.
I remember the first thing Jason, my manager, who's also an attorney, told me immediately after I was interviewing for this job was that I would need to know the Wisconsin bar rules for attorney advertising in and out if I wanted to get the job. I was like, yeah, that's not something that you do.
That's amazing. Yeah, no kidding. And so maybe can you say something? I mean, you already mentioned a couple of the constraints, but anything in that in those regulations that were surprising to you or that are really hard to incorporate into a good campaign?
Yeah, definitely. So you know how, like I mentioned, you can't really say you're the best unless you've been awarded as the best.
It's substantiated.
So, substantiated. So there are a lot of you will find online a lot of these organizations that will give you awards that give attorneys awards, but obviously it's a way of making money because you have to pay them to get those awards, and it's important for you to get those awards so you can advertise that you're one of the best.
Amazing. So unsurprisingly, a regulation has led to a cottage industry to meet the requirements of the regulation. That's amazing.
And these are just things that you learn after you're in the industry because when I was in political campaigning, I didn't know something like this existed, and I didn't know there was a cottage industry like you mentioned.
That's
But
fascinating. Yeah.
yeah, the thing that really differentiates us, or what, when you ask me about when you think of personal injury ads, you think
Yes.
of the ambulance chasing ads. Have you seen those memes that say, what I think I do, what my society thinks I do, what
Yes.
my parents think I do?
Yes. I love those, by the way. I'm
I
obsessed with
know.
that format. It's just it's a great way to present these ideas.
Yeah, exactly. So the memes for personal injury attorneys and people like me in this field is usually just a picture of a person chasing an ambulance.
Sure. Of course. Yes.
That's what people associate ads like this with. But what we try to, it's an aggressive space. It's an aggressive because the competition. And you also now see attorneys who have this crass messaging of humor that they include,
Yeah.
attorneys in Texas. And they're very interesting. It makes sense in this industry because of the nature of this industry.
Yeah.
Because when you don't want to think about car accidents, you don't want to think about pain. So you have to sort of include humor,
Yeah.
get the target audience's attention.
Yeah.
But what differentiates Habush is that Habush is not a settlement mill. Do you know what that is?
I think I do, but please describe it for everybody who's listening.
Yeah. So these are firms that settle large volumes of cases,
Hmm.
but not necessarily try to maximize the value of each claim.
Hmm.
So, having worked with 32 attorneys in the last few months, I know that attorneys at Habush will try to get the maximum compensation for you. They're not settlement mills. They're not trying to get the most number of cases, but they're trying to work on cases till they can get the maximum outcome. So that way, for us, messaging becomes really easy because we're not trying to get more cases. We're trying to get cases and then work on and then pass it on to attorneys who will put all of their effort. And that's what we show in our messaging. We are a law firm with nationally reputed attorneys who will fight for you, who will stand by you, and who will take your burden when you focus on healing.
Amazing. Yeah. No,
This is our, yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And I can see how that's very differentiating in the space. I mean, I don't know what the correlation is between the sort of the humorous approach and that settlement mill thing, but I imagine that it's high. Like I don't know, but I remember certainly every time I've driven into Las Vegas, there's all the billboards going in there. And it's, attorney Nikki Fix-It will make it all go away. And he's all dressed in gold with a Rolls Royce in the background. And it's funny and strange. And sounds like you guys probably don't have that image in Wisconsin.
We don't. Our competitors do. They try to sort of, lawsuits are very difficult. Lawsuits are challenging. They will take a lot of time. But for a person who is injured, it's obviously they will choose something that's easier, and that's what most other law firms try to market in a way in their messaging. That is just one call. That's all it takes for you to get this case settled, to fix this. But that's not true, and we're trying to stay away from that. We will tell you we will not. Just one call is not that's all that it takes. Will take a long time, but we will be there for you that entire time.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, like I said, very differentiating. It seems like it's a different approach. And I want to talk for a second about the way that influences the marketing. You already mentioned that this is sort of a different personality, perhaps, that you put out there. You talked a lot when we were preparing about the fact that you're data-driven and probably much more data-driven than a lot of your competitors. And I suspect what that means is that you have good evidence that positioning actually works better. Is there anything you can talk about in terms of your data-driven strategies and what it has told you about how to show up in the marketplace?
Yeah, of course. So we downloaded a lot of documents online to check what kind of demographic, what kind of psychographic. It becomes difficult discussing demographics when it comes to personal injury law firms because it's almost everyone who's injured. So you can't really focus your ads in a way. It's difficult to sort of put the injured people in a demographic when it comes to online advertising.
Everybody. Yeah, they're a representative sample of the whole population.
Exactly. So what data-driven a big game changer in data-driven marketing decision has been looking at, having you get access to car accident data for a long period of time, like 10 to 12 years. And then using time series modeling, you can predict car accidents then that occur in a certain region. And then making sure that your campaigns are aligned towards that time period to make sure that the people who are facing something like this have all the resources, have all the access they need. We know slip and fall accidents are very common during the winters because it's Wisconsin. But
Sure.
what are the months, what are the time periods when they rise? And finding that information and backing it up with data from the past has been very interesting. Then we're able to design campaigns around that.
That's amazing.
We also know that
Go ahead, go
people
ahead.
no, sorry. I was just saying we also know that people don't explore the personal injury category until they're in a dire situation. And when
course.
they do that, they make a decision within a week. So that
Wow.
was something that we found through our data, through lots of data that's available on the internet. So catering to that audience within the week and the type of sensitive messaging that we want to reach out to them with is something that data has helped us with.
That's amazing. And this is fascinating that you use data at that level. I want to go back to what you said about the time series modeling. That sounds like incredibly sophisticated. So what you're saying, I think, if I'm hearing you right, is that you're able to look at historical personal injury data and then project forward and sort of figure out how many personal injuries of similar kinds you would expect in various regions, and then sort of direct your marketing accordingly.
Yep. Yeah, that is something that we're able to do now.
Boy, that's incredible. And that must have measurable positive results to do that and get it correct. I mean, how I'm just curious, like, are you able, are the estimates usually pretty accurate? I'm sure that COVID threw off everything, so I don't know that any of the projections anybody made about those couple of years, including personal injury stuff, because everybody was staying at home. But in the post-COVID era, has that data been pretty accurate?
Again, you can't look at 1 or 2 years. You have to look at least 6 or 7
Sure.
years, or longer than that. The longer, the better. So this is something that we're experimenting with for the first time this year. So maybe next year I can tell you if it's working.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Fair enough.
something
All
we're
right.
experimenting with.
We'll come back in a year and see how it went. I'm fascinated by that, though. I love the application of smart statistics to business problems, and this sounds like a really good example of that. So the other thing I know, you were describing a little bit of a tangle on the legal side that you've been involved in at Habush, around Google keywords, and I know that the listeners here who are marketers or who would like to be marketers or who know marketers would be interested to hear what happened there and how you resolved it.
Yeah, definitely. So in 2009, the firm had filed a lawsuit against one of our competitors. You know how Google really has no rules against bidding on brand keywords, regardless of whose brand it is. It could be yours or others. So one of our competitors was obviously paying for the keywords Habush and Rottier. So when you searched for something like that, the sponsored search result of the competitor's website was showing up.
Mm-hmm.
So the lawsuit was based on a Wisconsin Right to Privacy Act, a statute that prohibits the use of any living person's name for advertising purposes without the person's consent. But unfortunately, the firm lost after a really long battle because we failed to establish that such a use was done unreasonably.
Yeah.
So we lost, but that was something different and no one had done that before. And I'm glad our firm did. Because what do you do in a scenario like this? With marketing strategies like these, do you stoop to the competitor's level or do you try to play it even? And that is one of the biggest challenges that we face right now, is just trying to address the competition and address it in the extreme ways that they're willing to go.
Yeah, well, especially as you described it, a very aggressive space. And as a firm that I think is trying to do this in a different, more responsible way, it's pretty hard when your competitors are not. That makes a lot of sense. And actually, that legal issue you're describing, that of course has become central for anybody who is advertising, using keywords of competitors' brands. That's very interesting. it reminds me that when most of the laws that are on the books around advertising and the use of copyrighted terms or brand names, when most of those were established, nobody could particularly have guessed that something like Google would be around where we'd be asking these questions. So I know that they've long time had a policy that you can't use somebody else's brand in the ad copy. Even that seems a little slippery, that people get away with that unless they're called out specifically. But yeah, this idea of bidding on brand keywords is it's going to be an ongoing question, I think, for a while.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's obviously frowned upon, but if the competition is willing to go to that level, you have to address the competition in a way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's amazing. Well, and so it fascinating to me too, that it's in this particular case, there's a branding question that I think every company that has a brand name has navigated or needs to navigate. And that you guys were dealing with a legal issue as a law firm is interesting. I'm sure that quite a lot of thought was put into how to argue that effectively. And that's an amazing story. I'm glad you shared it.
Yeah, and just while I was thinking of challenges, another thing that I wanted to bring up was just the reputation that attorneys have. I know most people think of attorneys as sharks and someone who's just out there for your money. Fighting that reputation as a marketing PR person is really difficult. And because in fact, that I personally, when I joined the law firm, my manager had asked me to sit in intakes and depositions and trials. And I mean, hearing people narrate their stories of being hurt severely every single day, compassion fatigue is normal and it is real when something like that happens. But most attorneys I've worked with are very passionate about their cases and they try to at least do the best they can. They are compassionate, but it comes across that way and it makes sense. But it's interesting I bring this up because it's right now Mental Wellbeing in Law Week. So I've just been thinking about that a lot.
Sure.
And just knowing that most people don't even know that attorneys work on a contingency fee. They only get paid if you do. And that is why they negotiate or try to get the most amount of money. So that because the percentage of the total amount is what goes to the law firm. So fighting this entire idea of attorneys being sharks or being insensitive is another ballgame that comes into marketing.
Yeah, that's interesting. And like we were talking about before, in this space in particular, right? There's that sort of a brand to fight. That's the perception. You raise a really interesting point, an important one there too. I mean, it's sort of Attorney Mental Health Week this week. I was just reading something in the New York Times earlier this week. Vivek Murthy, the Surgeon General, talking about this epidemic of loneliness. And the mental health problems associated with that. Attorneys aren't immune to that. And I think especially as you're describing in a space like this where compassion fatigue is a real thing, the stressors of winning or not winning cases, I couldn't do it. I know I couldn't do it. And I'm sure that takes a toll. So it's very interesting to kind of raise the human side of this as well. Yeah, fascinating. So, well, this is a wonderful conversation. I wanted to ask you, as we're rounding the bend here, you talked a bit about some of the data-driven sort of approach that you take in doing this. Any other tips or tricks that you can share about the data that you pay attention to that's most valuable in helping you make marketing decisions? I love this story about the time series data and sort of mapping that out. What else is new or interesting or meaningful or moves the needle in your world right now when it comes to data-driven decision-making?
Yeah, another thing that we had experimented last year, you should also understand that most law firms, mid-sized law firms, don't really have marketing positions. Most of them are done by attorneys. So they don't have as much knowledge in marketing. I was lucky enough to go to a great school, Texas A&M, for marketing, where I learned all of this, where I learned data-driven decision-making. But most mid-sized law firms, I don't see looking at this data or even data that they have with regard to their caseload. One of the things that I introduced this year was just looking at past data, looking at the data of their caseloads. What time are they getting what kind of cases from? We usually ask, when we're taking lead intakes, we usually ask leads where they heard about us. So just looking at that data at that level, and what calls are we getting at what time, looking at data from our social media campaigns, looking at data from our website, and trying to make sense of it together to create a budget that will help you, not just by creating a random budget based on what you feel like is going to work. So that has definitely helped. Even looking, I really think a law firm should start collecting that data. I don't know if other law firms do that, but just their caseload data and marketing data associated with that, because that will help you in the future. That'll help you predict what kind of cases, what the severity of cases. And I'm pretty sure you can do all this in the future, because I believe in the big data work that's been going on right now. So I'm pretty sure you can predict all of this. So I think that is very important, to just make sure you're collecting that data and looking at it.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's such a wonderful sort of classic and underappreciated marketing trick, which is to take the outside in view. We're sitting here in the business or in the firm, and what we see is the business that we're familiar with, and we forget about what the customer or prospect's experience is, or potential clients' experiences coming in. And the things that we can learn about what to do next from a marketing perspective from taking that point of view are almost endless. So that's wonderful. And you're right. Also, I have seen this a lot of times when there's a professional, whether it's a lawyer or a doctor or a contractor or an architect, that are extremely good at their chosen field and profession, that it's very easy for them to miss some of these fairly traditional and standard ways of approaching marketing. And so when you turn that on just a little bit, you can have outsized results.
Exactly. And you see that a lot in mid-level law firms. So
yeah, amazing. Well, they are very lucky to have you there in bringing all this this knowledge and understanding and expertise to this challenge, and especially for somebody who's been around for 100 years, a firm that's been around for almost 100 years. Wonderful to see that they're stepping up and taking a modern approach. I know there's a lot of older businesses that fail to do that, and this is only going to help them, I think, and help you to drive for the next 100 years, which is great.
Definitely.
Well, Anjali, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you taking the time. This is a fascinating conversation, and we'll bring you back in a year, and we'll see how this this data comes out, and do a little bit of a report and a look back at that point.
I would love that. Thank you, John.
Sounds good. I'll put it on our calendar. Anjali, thank you so much. I'll see you in a year.
Yes.